Hello, I'm Eric Smith here with a graphical approach to the law, and we will examine this MBE style multiple choice question. The question reads, a stream flows through the adjoining lots of upstream owner and downstream owner. Upstream owner dams the stream to create a lake from which a substantially reduced amount of water flows to downstream owner's lot. Downstream owner had never made use of the stream in the past. The question is, will downstream owner prevail in a suit? And there are certain options here. And just to illustrate, a little diagram here shows upstream owner. The stream is passing through his lot, and it passes through downstream owner and continues on regularly. But now, of course, a dam has been built by upstream owner. The question is here, what area of the law applies and what particular crime or tort may apply. So a clue actually is given in option number 4. It says that there may have been unreasonable and substantial interference with the use and enjoyment of the land by downstream owner. And what that leads us to is the torts area of the law, and specifically to private nuisance, which is diagrammed here in its elements. So the private nuisance is shown here in that the defendant somehow causes, and the causation area is shown here between the bubbles representing the defendant and the plaintiff. This area here with the arrow shows the causation and the characteristics of the causation. So somehow or other something caused an unreasonable and substantial interference with the bubble to the right here, which represents the plaintiff and or his or her property. So the plaintiff here will have suffered some change in the use of their land, and which may have interfered with enjoyment, with the personal enjoyment of the land. And the summary definition of private nuisance appears at the bottom, saying private nuisance is the substantial, unreasonable interference with the use and enjoyment of land, and an objective balancing test is used between the utility gained by the defendant and the injury incurred by the plaintiff. So this objective balancing test is a third-party objective view at the utility and injury present, and a balancing as to which side the decision goes to, either to the defendant or the plaintiff. So if we look at the options in the question, the first option says that no, the downstream owner will not prevail because the dam was safe. Well, the fact pattern doesn't tell us if the dam was safe or not, but if we look at the definition of private nuisance, it doesn't indicate whether or not the action done by the defendant had to have been safe or not. In fact, no stipulation is made in this empty bubble of the defendant as to the nature of the act of the defendant. The nature's act in some ways is irrelevant. The causation, or what the act caused on the plaintiff, is relevant, and that has to have certain characteristics of unreasonableness and causing a substantial interference. So option A is wrong. Option B says no, the downstream owner will not prevail because the downstream owner had never made use of the stream in the past. Now the historical use also is of no relevance, and you can see here in the graphical summary of what private nuisance constitutes the fact that there is no reference to historical use or historical details as to how the land was used. We look at the present situation and how it has been changed by the defendant. Option C here says, yes, the downstream owner will prevail, but only if the upstream owner had intended to interfere with the downstream owner's use of the land. So C, option C, points us towards the presence of intent of the upstream owner, the defendant. And going back here to the graphical representation of the elements of private nuisance, we can see that the area for intent of the defendant is blank. That means that uh, some acts or all acts, there doesn't have to be an element of intent or a type of intent proven on the part of the defendant, the upstream owner here. So the intent is irrelevant to the application of the theory of private nuisance. And so option C is wrong. And then here we have option D, which is yes, the downstream owner will prevail if the damming unreasonably and substantially interfered with the use and enjoyment of the land by downstream owner. And this answer matches very much the definition of private nuisance. So we find that these elements are present in the definition of private nuisance: the unreasonable and substantial interference with the use of the land by the plaintiff, who is downstream owner, and the qualitative aspects there are interference with the enjoyment, with the personal enjoyment of the land by the plaintiff, and that may have to do with health and peace reasons or aspects of the land. For example, the plaintiff, the downstream owner, may have simply looked at the full stream in the past and have derived health and peace benefits, enjoyment benefits, personal benefits from the full stream flowing through the land, and now has a substantially reduced amount of flow in the stream. And so the personal enjoyment, health, and peace benefits may have been substantially interfered with. And the court will look at this from an objective standpoint and apply a balancing test and consider whether the utility gained by the defendant was greater than or lesser than compared to the injury incurred by the plaintiff. Here, of course, the balancing test is met and falls to the side of the plaintiff, because we are specifically told that the damming was unreasonable and substantially interfered with the use and enjoyment by the downstream owner. So the correct answer here is D.